You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Thank you for having me today. Happy New Year. I feel like it's been a while since we've chatted, so I'm excited for us to have this great podcast today.
Yes, I know we had the holiday rush, and now here we are back in the new year, back to recording more episodes.
Yeah. More importantly, and I feel like we haven't caught up, have you been watching Traitors?
I have. I didn't watch last week's episode. I'm normally a little bit behind, but
I watched it last night and it was so good. So I catch up on it later.
Yeah, it's always such a fun way to start the new year when you have a good TV show to binge and dive into.
And anyone that's listening knows that we love to talk about reality TV, and Traitors came back, and I can't. And there's a good cast this year. I'm in for it. So anyway, well, we'll have to catch up on that later. But in honor of National Burn Awareness Week, well, I should say it is National Burn Awareness Week, and hosted by the American Burn Association. This year's theme, Burn Prevention, Where You Live, Work, and Play, Preventing Burns in the Workplace, highlights how simple, proactive safety measures and education in the workplace can significantly reduce the risk of serious injuries and build safer communities for everyone. So we're excited for today's guest, and Rachel, I'll let you introduce them.
Yes, so today we are welcoming on Shaun Free. On March 13th, 2018, Shaun survived a devastating industrial propane explosion while working beneath a delivery truck leaking liquid propane. When the gas ignited, his life changed in an instant. Shaun escaped from under the burning truck and extinguished the flames in a nearby snowbank. He was airlifted from Montana to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle with burns over 46% of his body. He endured multiple surgeries, life-threatening complications, and weeks in the burn ICU. That experience reshaped Shaun's perspective and revealed a resilience he didn't know he had. Today, he shares his journey, along with the lessons learned through recovery, to inspire others facing their own life-changing challenges. So thank you so much, Shaun, for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Shaun, I know that we have a lot to cover today, but before we do, we always ask our survivors to cover a little bit about, in their own words, their burn injury and their journey as a survivor. So if you don't mind, I know Rachel just gave us a little bit of an intro, but would you share with the listeners a little bit more about your burn injury?
Yeah. So my burns, said 46% of my body. On my left side, that goes from like my calf up to my back. I have burn grafts and scars through there, and this whole side. Yeah, not so bad. They did use my own skin for my skin grafts on what other parts are useful, and just want to talk more about like the injury itself or when it happened. Sorry.
Yeah, more about that day, I guess. What caused, right, like the propane to
Oh, yeah. So I was working on the truck. They had to have the pump rebuilt. They have a big 3-inch internal valve on the bottom of those trucks. That valve is what failed. I was trying to evacuate that portion of the system, and as I did, it just kept on leaking out liquid gas or liquid propane. Once I crawled under the truck to unhook a line, tried to get the valve to close, that's when the explosion happened. I was reaching up, and the flames just wrapped around the pump and slammed me. I rolled over. Once all the explosion happened, I ran to the snowbank, and I remember as I was running, I was looking over and looking at all my clothes being melted off, thinking, I'm going to look like Deadpool. This is going to be terrible. My friends and I just watched that movie right before that happened, so fresh in the brain. Then I put myself out in a snowbank. As I was laying there, just trying to figure out what had just happened. Everything went so fast. Some lady came up and goes, "Hey, we got to get out of here." So I rolled over, and I still don't know where that lady came from. We're out in the middle of a field in the middle of Montana. So the only thing I really scared was a bunch of cows. That's probably a good thing. But she rolled me over and was like, "Hey, we got to get out of here." And I looked and I realized all I had left was like a loincloth and my clothes, and one boot was all that
Mm,
was left. We, we got up, she got me up, and walked to a pickup, and then they drove me to the side of the road where I talked to the sheriff and handed him what was what left of my wallet and a pocket knife that was in my hand, and
mm,
then gave my statement to a sheriff, gave him my rings and all that, had him shipped to my wife, walked to the back of an ambulance, and scared those two poor guys. They didn't expect some guy with one boot on just crawling in the back of their ambulance.
mm, mhm.
Um, then went to the hospital there in Helena, Montana, where they sedated me to get sent to Seattle.
Mm. And I know, you're really open about sharing your story and, that near death experience. Why is it so important that, people understand that part of your story?
Because like it's hard to explain. During that experience is the most peace I've ever felt. All the societal judgment and all that stuff was kind
Hmm.
of gone. That was one thing that really, when I woke up, has really stuck with me.
Hmm.
It's just weird in that dream, trying to talk to my wife, and she wouldn't listen to me. And well, I guess I'll back up for a second. When they sedated me, I woke up in Seattle, and I had like a suit on, and I stand there, I could see the Seattle cityscape, and didn't make much sense. And I was like, well, I've been hitting the head a lot, so I know lapse of memory happens. So I just thought my brain kind of cut out part of my recovery. Then it started dawning on me what was happening. I just heard, "Hey, everybody you love's behind that door. All you got to do is go through it." And I was like, ah, if she's not going with me, I'm not going anywhere. So then I started getting pretty upset because I was refusing to go, and I woke up.
Mm.
When I woke up, all I could see is my charred nose, and everything was so swollen. I could see my charred lips, and that was when that was a dream. Had to come back to here. Dang it.
and and
Um,
obviously you had, and I mentioned in your bio, you had complications. You obviously had a long ICU stay. So what were some of those, I guess, challenges kind of in that initial healing for you? And do you have, any tips for, other survivors who are maybe still in that, initial healing?
Yeah. So well, got to think about it for a second. That initial portion, I had MRSA in my left leg, so they had to end up
Mm,
redoing that skin graft. Both of my lungs, I had pneumonia in both lungs. They had to put tubes in. That's what really prolonged my stay in there. So I couldn't walk for the first couple weeks just because of the skin grafts on the back of my legs. The only thing I could tell people is just you got to move. You, that's the hardest part in that beginning, especially when your whole body hurts. Is just you got to get moving. It's what really helps. Get everything, start getting blood flow and some drive.
I myself had a skin graft. I didn't have MRSA, but I had a skin graft that didn't stick, which can be very frustrating when you're like wanting to get better and having to do that process all over again. So I can completely relate to that. I understand that you've reframed what we call post-traumatic stress disorder as post-traumatic growth. What does that shift in language and mindset mean to you personally?
Well, that goes all the way back to the beginning of my recovery. I don't know if your listeners know about Jocko Willink. He's a Navy SEAL motivational speaker. He has a audio track, "Good," where he just talks about no matter what happens, just try to find the good and what can come out of it. Lose your job, good. You got a chance to move to another career, that type of thing. Every morning I just listen to that, be like, all right, what's the good that's going to come out of this? And for the first little bit, it was just the future, just the recovery is the best part that's going to come out of it. But I'd listen to that every day before I wound care.
I think that's really important that you highlight that, because I hadn't listened to that, but my husband and I always trying to find some positivity, right? Because maybe we weren't, maybe I didn't have that surgery or had to have another surgery for my skin graft, but the light of it is like, okay, I can get it healed, and it might take a little bit longer, but I'm going to be healed. So finding some kind of positivity, I think, is really important, especially when it comes to something that does seem so big of a mountain, right, to tackle. So I really like that. And we'll definitely did you say it was Jocko? Was his first name?
Jocko Willink.
Willink. Okay, well, we should put that in our show notes for everyone as well.
Yeah, they're a really good company. I reached out to them early in my recovery and told them about, what that did for me. So they brought me to one of their big events and used me as a, what do they call it? It's inspiration deal.
Very cool.
Big convention is kind of cool.
We'll definitely put that in our show notes. That's awesome. But talk a little bit more. Obviously, you had that song, but like, what else kind of helped you get from this like survival mode into growing again and getting back to living after a burn injury?
That was it. When I was in the hospital, I was watching one of the late night shows. I can't even remember the guy's name. But who knows if the TV was really on? They had me so medicated. But this girl was talking to the host, and he started asking about her dad, and I was like, oh man, if somebody asks my daughter about me, do I want them to go? Do I want her to? Hey, there was an accident. We don't talk about it. Or, oh, my dad was in this, and he came out just thriving. Just want to be a good role model for them. And it's all mental gymnastics, especially in the beginning. You just got to find what drives you.
Definitely. Well, what other, I guess, do you have any advice for families too, who are, like you said, you wanted to, be a positive role model for your daughter? Do you have any other, I guess, tips for families who are going through a similar journey and maybe they're not sure how to talk about it with the burn survivor in their life, or not sure how to, I guess, maybe best support them?
A patience for everybody involved. I mean, it's not easy. What we go through as survivors is there's a mental part of it, there's a physical part of it. It's just a lot of patience and just communication. I'm lucky my wife's a social worker, so she has a lot of those tools already. But it's just communicate and support is the biggest part.
Awesome. Well, I know we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about once you got home from the hospital, but is there anything else you wanted to share with us or touch on, kind of as part of that early healing that you were going through?
Yeah, some of the big things for me, you've actually, Grace, the artist you had on, she's a friend of mine, and one of her colleagues, Claudia, she painted in that picture. She's a pregnant woman. She was one of the first person I saw when I came out of the recovery. So she was my, I wasn't a social worker, but she helped me coordinate a lot of stuff. But to see a burn survivor that early on, you're like, okay, there is a life after this. There is, there is a target later on. It's not just going to be the burnt guy forever.
Yep.
There's something more after that. And so just that, and I had 4 of my nurses I'm still really good friends with. This Noelle, she works in plastics in Harborview, and Rachel and Caitlin and Michael. It's all really good people. Still friends with them, and it's a good time having those connections later on.
A lot of good connections as a result of your injury. So when we're talking about like reframing, I'm sure there's a part of you that appreciates the friendships that you've made. That's how I feel sometimes with post recovery. Like, had this not happened to me, I wouldn't have had this different outlook, but also the relationships that I've made as a result. So, sounds like you've definitely made some
And
good
it's a
relationships.
relationship with like really resilient people, and
Mm-hmm.
that's big.
For sure. So I understand, and I had to look this up because I don't even know what this meant, but it sounds like you've made a propane forge and you started
Yeah.
making knives. And for those that are watching, they can see you've got quite the collection over your left shoulder.
Those are the like forgotten projects or
Forgotten
future
project as
ones.
well. So why was this important to you? I know personally, like, after my accident, like I didn't want anything to do with anything fire related, and you made a propane forge after a propane explosion. So I want to hear a little bit more about like why, and also like what why this was important to you.
So I started making knives before the accident. So when I was in the hospital, a lot of my friends gave me knife books. So then all I had was time. So I'm reading those books. I really wanted to get back into knife making, and just my whole thought was I'd come out of the hospital, start making knives, and just start selling those full time. Was my ultimate goal. Um, but yeah, there's a couple aspects to it. One, I didn't want to be afraid of fire. It's something that I've been with my whole life. I mean, I'm outdoors guy. I make campfires and just all the stuff, metal worker and all that. So I came home. I was still in bandages when I built the forge. So started doing that. And just that. I also think part of our recovery, just making stuff, really helps. And it doesn't really matter what it is. Cookies, crocheting, just finding something you can focus on other than your injuries and you is a good, healthy distraction. It just really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hearing that Grace, and for our listeners who also know Grace, and we talked about it, she is an artist, and she also kind of has something similar of like that outlet with your hands, and creating something on your own after injury can really be healing. So I love that kind of parallel between both you and Grace.
It's
Yeah,
really
Grace is
fun.
great.
I've even got into making jewelry. Like I have a lot of leftover knife remnants, so now I don't know how many earrings my wife has and all the stuff of all the little shiny things that I hang on earrings and necklaces, and lately got into coppersmithing, so I'm making bracelets and all that fun stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Do
so
you
can you
sell the knives now, I guess is my question.
Oh yeah, I was selling knives at $500-$600 a piece, and I was
Wow.
making pretty nice knives.
Very cool.
It's awesome.
Now
What
I make them now and like donate them for different stuff. I'm gonna make a few for Camp Eyabsut, where I'm a counselor with Grace,
Awesome.
and help raise money for that. That's kind of what I do with them now. I don't like selling them. That takes the fun out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, we'll definitely talk about camp too, but before we dive into that, can you just talk a little bit more? I know you briefly touched on it, just whether it's in your case making knives, in Grace's cases it's art and painting, but how did, I guess, that like having something physical to work on and create help you with your healing? And what, again, like what tips or advice would you give to other survivors who are trying to find that creative outlet as well?
I think there's multiple aspects of it. One, you're taking something and you're improving it, so you're putting work into it, and you're focusing on how to improve your craft and the item you're working on. So like I said earlier, it's a different mindset. You're not focusing on the bad stuff, so you're doing that. And then just the act of creating just makes you feel better. You've made something. I really focused on
Mm-hmm.
like making tools. So like I'm a hunter. I make knives for my friends, or I've made axes, camp stuff. It's just, and then later on, as you're using that tool, it makes you feel better also. I think it's
Now,
just
did you
good to
have
help you
burns on your
focus.
hands?
No, I was lucky. My hands and my feet didn't get burned.
Okay. I know for me, like my hands were burned, but the ability to move my hands again and be able to do something did help with the burns, right? It did help kind of because your hands kind of stiffen up. So I didn't know if that were also the case for you, but it sounds like you were grateful that you didn't have that, but also having the ability to still focus on something other than your burns and your healing. I know I did after my injury, I took to yoga and that was like my focus. From what I understand, you also left the hospital pretty like May 4th and then jumped right into teaching motorcycle class. Is that correct?
Yeah.
On June 12th. So you were less, just over a month. And why did you get out so quickly? Like, it sounds like you didn't waste any time.
No, I'm not very good at idling. I kind of
Myself either. So we have that in common.
yeah. And I just wanted to, I don't know, because you hear so much stuff about PTSD, and then I was in the hospital and I was reading about it, and I was just like, I had to get back to and start redefining what my new normal is going to be. I knew I wouldn't be always back to where I used to be, but I did want to just get back to what my new normal was going to be, and I wasn't going to let it be sitting down. I wanted to be positive.
So were you always into motorcycles before your accident, or what kind of drove you to wanting to teach motorcycle classes?
So I got my first motorcycle at 3 years old. I didn't know how to ride a bicycle. I was riding a motorcycle all over the little farm I lived on. So it's just kind of part of my DNA now. As I was growing up, you don't have a lot of career time in the weekends, and you're always working odd shifts. But after I got my career going, I went into motorcycle training in 2015. So I'd been a trainer for 3 years by that time. But
and I understand, speaking of kind of being a supporter or a trainer, you also work or not work, but you volunteer for camp. I'm going to mess this up. Eyabsut, is that correct?
You probably said it better than I would have. I messed it up too.
Which is a burn camp, correct? And
yes.
That's part of the hospital that you were treated at, correct?
Yeah. While I was in the hospital, one of the nurses approached me about that camp and was like, "Hey, you seem like a guy that would enjoy it." So after a few years, I got a hold of him, and actually Troy, he got me on one of the Phoenix Foundation peer support groups. He cornered me in there and talked me into it.
And so now you're a camp counselor, is that correct?
Yep.
And so do you counsel for young kids too?
Yeah, they give me the teenage kids because we're about the same mentality, same sense of humor, so we get along well.
And what is that like? How did that impact your healing? I'm sure you've enjoyed that, it sounds like, but what do you like most about being a camp counselor?
For that week, everybody's normal. We're not different because we're all the same in there. That was, I didn't think it'd be a big deal until I got there, and I was like, oh, it really does make you feel more comfortable. Everybody there is just to support each other. It's pretty awesome. Cool. Then just the resiliency of kids. Like there's kids in there that got way worse than I did. They're just driven. It's very impressive, very humbling.
Kids are very resilient. We talk about that a lot on this show of how as adults, I think we're shaped by, other experiences that we've had, but kids being so young and just they want to get out there and, my son will knock himself down and still get up and keep running. And I think that's the same with young kids is they're just, they see the world very differently than we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am a camp kid myself, so I know firsthand, the power and magic that happens at those camps. But I guess as an adult, kind of getting more involved in camp, do you what was that experience like? And do you have tips again for other survivors who want to get more involved? Because, like I said, I was a camp kid, so I was going to camp every single year and was always actively involved. But it is true, the camp counselors are the ones that like the kids are having fun, but we remember and look up to the camp counselors who are there, not only making the week so powerful, but like I remember a big takeaway for me was just like, oh, like there are adults like living life and like not letting their burn stop them. And that was really, really impactful for me as a kid.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really fun. It's a different experience all the way around because I didn't go to camp as a kid. I grew up on a farm. Like in the summers when you were working, you weren't can't out doing that stuff. So like my first year there, I actually made my mom some stuff at camp and sent it to her. I was like, it took me 40 something years, but you got stuff from me from camp. That was pretty fun. Just it's really neat to see those kids, just all the stuff that they do. It's humbling. I don't know how better way to describe it. I look up to them more than they do to me, I think.
Yeah. Do you have any like advice for parents too who are maybe dropping off their kids at camp? I know that can be sometimes a challenge. My parents, since I was so young, the first year I went to camp, I wasn't allowed to stay over. I was only 4. So I was lucky enough that the camp was close enough to my house that my parents would just drive me every day. And I'm sure that actually relieved some stress from them because they were there with me. So, but I know that can be really traumatic and tough for parents to be dropping their kids off at camp. So, just curious if you have anything you want the parent listeners to know.
Let us know if your kid's got something. We don't want to discover it in the middle of the second day. Let us know.
Yeah.
I've also just saw that you have multiple tattoos grafted or over your grafted skin, which is definitely something I'm very interested in talking to you about. But I understand you had good and bad experiences, which is also like unlocking a fear of mine as well. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a Deadpool on my right calf, and my right leg is the one that healed really well. So I already had an appointment, a 2-day appointment scheduled before I got burned. My guy's scheduled out about a year. So when my appointment came up, he was working on this sleeve to recolor some of it and add stuff back into it. And then he's looking at my leg, and on my calf, there's a skin graft. And he's like, when you're ready, I really want to put a Deadpool here and use, your skin graft as part of his face. I was like, I'm going to be here tomorrow. So it was like 6 months after my accident, I had my first tattoo over a graft. It was on my right leg. It healed really well, really fast. So it was like I don't know how your guys' scars are. Some of mine are really thin and some of them are thickness. So the right leg felt integral. It felt pretty good. So we did that one. And then when the Wolverine and Deadpool movie came out, he goes, "Hey, let's put a Wolverine on your left leg." But my left leg is the one where I had MRSA. They redid that skin graft the week before I left the hospital. So it's like that leg's just been under problems the whole time. There's a nerve ball on the back of my calf. If it gets hit too hard, this whole leg just shuts off for a little bit. So we already knew there was problems with the left leg. So he tattooed on the part of it I thought was fine, and that was probably the most miserable tattoo I've ever had. That was a really long day. But so I just want people, if you're going to get tattooed over your grafts, kind of think of what's the integrity of that skin. Because my left leg, all that skin's still like tissue paper. It's still really thin after 8 years. So we went into that knowing that side was going to suck, but I'll probably never tattoo that leg for the rest of I'll leave it alone from now on. The
I've
ink
heard
held really well,
stories.
but
I'm part of the groups that the different, the different like burn groups, and I've heard some good stories and bad stories. And I think in a lot of cases, you also have to do a lot of research on who is going to be the person that you're going to, how do I say this? Make sure
your
that you
artist.
do your research, right? Yeah, and make sure that they know what they're doing. Because from what I understand, it can be very risky to get someone who doesn't have a lot of experience. And that doesn't mean like not everybody has to have experience tattooing over grafts, but like a more seasoned tattoo artist, I think, will have better understanding than someone who's maybe not super familiar.
Well, yeah, it's in the tattoo world, it's like either is your guy heavy-handed or light-handed. So the guy I have do my tattoos I've known since high school. We've been friends for a long time, but he's very light-handed. He uses more technique than force, I guess is the best way to put it. But he
Yeah.
does really good work.
I
And
mean,
I think that
yeah,
has more to do with the light and heavy hands.
for sure. I have 2 tattoos, neither on my skin grafts. And the one is so much better than the other because I did my research and found someone versus one on a whim with my friend to get the other. And no one's not as cute. But it's fine. So yes, definitely do your research. And do you have any tips for like after care of the tattoo healing? Because I know we do get that question all the time of like, I do have someone like my skin's healed, I'm ready to get a tattoo on my scars, but not everyone knows like in terms of, is it just the same as typical, tattoo aftercare, or do you have any tips for anything else?
Aftercare, you just gotta keep them covered with what stuff we use. Well, I'm blanking on the name now. A&D ointment is what we put over them. Just
Yeah.
kind of the same thing you'd put over your burn scars, what you'd want to put over your tattoo stuff. One of the weirdest things about those tattoos, I just remembered, was I don't know how your grafts are. My nerve system's now in grids. It's like as they're tattooing my leg, I won't feel anything in one spot, and then all of a sudden I'll feel all of it, and then it goes back to not feeling anything other than a vibration. And that was the weirdest part about after it. I was like, well, that's no. Oh,
Yeah. I'm not brave enough yet. I think maybe I just haven't found a good tattoo artist either, but I always just get so nervous around the topic because I've heard both what you just described, like the good ones, and then I've also heard the bad ones. So and I'm like, I'm in a good place in my life. I don't think I'm prepared to like have a bad experience and have to like end up back somewhere. So one day it's a goal, and you're braver than I was. But with that said, I know we're coming up on time here, but we always ask our guests 2 final questions, and we are recording a new podcast season, so we're in season 8. So we've switched up our questions a little bit, and so here we go. I don't know how this one's going to land, but we're going to try it. If the season of your life had this season, the one of your burn injury had a soundtrack or a song, I love music, so we're changing it up this season. What would your sound? What would it sound like? What would your song be? So you can give me a song or a sound or something that would relate to your burn injury.
Sturgill Simpson, Turtles All the Way Down. I don't know if you've ever heard that song.
I haven't, but we're gonna start putting these songs in our season 8 episodes.
The beginning of that song, he says, "I've seen Jesus play with flames of lake of fire I was standing in." Then he he met the devil in Seattle. It's so weird how the beginning part of that song kind of coincides with my entire injury.
And tell me it's called Turtles All the Way Down. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, I got it here. We're going to start including these. Rachel didn't even know I was going to ask that question. I just switched to her. So, surprise.
Yeah. But he recorded that, and the first time I heard that song after my injury, I pulled over. I had to give it a good cry for a couple minutes. It's just like,
what's so funny is there are certain songs that just hit us for our recovery. Like there's, I can tell you, like I'm a big fan of Hosier, and I listened to him like through most of my recovery, and I feel like I can't hear that song anymore without thinking of my injury. So it's funny how music does that to us.
Yep. It is pretty cool. Music's pretty powerful. It can help you change your mood. You can do a lot.
Yep.
For sure. Well, with that, it is time for our final question. And today's question is, what is one message you hope sticks with listeners after today?
It'll get better. Just you got to keep pushing. That's one thing I think I've always done, is just bite down the mouthpiece and just keep pushing forward. It's kind of too dumb to quit. Another one I use. But yeah, just keep pushing forward. It'll get better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I'm hoping that these questions this season will resonate with our listeners. Maybe it's listening to that song or hearing those words of advice. We get a lot of listeners that listen directly. So you're a peer supporter, right?
Yep.
This podcast is something you can offer in the hospital. I know we have a lot of folks that are offered our podcast even when they're still recovering. A lot of them don't even want to talk to folks, but perhaps listening to a story of someone else that has had the same or similar, right, incident. And as we close out, I think it's important that we do highlight Burn Awareness Week. So were you working, Shaun, during that time? Was this?
Yep.
So can you, I think final question as we close out, can you talk a little bit about like why this Burn Awareness Week is important to you, especially when it comes to the workplace?
So one of the things I'm doing now is I'm a motorcycle instructor. I'm actually operations manager for that same program. So I'm going out and talking to kids with driver's ed. Now I'm talking to the shop classes. I'm setting up a program to go talk to them about, hey, you're a blue collar worker. You're going to start doing this stuff, working on industrial equipment. Do your job correctly so that accidents don't happen. Fill out the paperwork, do the work, make sure you keep the next person safe.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I know safety is just one of the most important things. And sometimes I think we try to bypass it in hopes that, like we can get stuff done quicker, get home faster, or things like that. And I think sometimes when we try to cut corners, that's when accidents happen, right? So the importance, especially this week, sharing how much safety is important for everyone. So I really appreciate you continuing to spread the message for us as well.
Oh yeah, it's important. It's weird. I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anybody, but I'm glad it happened. It's kind of a weird deal.
We've had Dan Plexman on the show, I think, Rachel, who also had a workplace incident. And I believe, correct, Rachel, we'll put it in the show notes
I think
too.
so, yeah.
And he does similar. Dan, if you're not familiar with Dan, Shaun, I definitely recommend giving a listen. You guys should connect for sure. Dan does some speaking across, especially to he was a lineman, and he was electrocuted on the job, and so he goes around and talks just like this to share the importance of safety because of what happened to him. So you and Dan have similar tracks of stories, right? Of being injured on the job and knowing the importance of sharing workplace safety with everyone. So very, very cool story. And we appreciate you joining the podcast today.
I'll have to look at the podcast up and listen to it today.
Yeah, you'll send it over. Well, thanks again.
Awesome.
We really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing all the great things that you continue to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.